right, college basketball, it is back, and so are we here on the College Basketball Tip-Off Show powered by WagerTalk.com, and, of course, our friends over at the Gold Sheet, as we're looking forward to diving into a couple of the big games here tonight, and maybe none bigger, of course, than the game that we're going to get later on tonight with Duke and Kentucky, also known as the Champions Classic, but we've also got Michigan State and Kansas on tap to talk about, not to mention some old blue bloods like Villanova. Baylor has got an interesting game tonight. Some of the mid-majors versus the big boys. A lot to break down for you here as we're off and running. And we'll do it, of course, with two of the most familiar faces you'll have when it comes to college hoops. Double R1L, Steve Merrill back in the house, as is Brian Leonard, who a little birdie already tells me is locked and loaded. He's got a 3-pack of games ready to roll for tonight in college basketball, which is always good to hear. And guys, we'll start with Kansas and Michigan State up first here on the Classics. And yes, welcome back, Jason Bumgartner. I see you guys in the chat room starting to pour in. We appreciate you coming by. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as long as you're in there. And Merrill, let's talk a little bit here about Kansas, who had no problem dispatching North Carolina there in a game to open up the season. But I got to tell you, I've been talking to a bunch of people who follow Michigan State basketball, and they are not thinking this is a great Tom Izzo team. They've handled a couple of nobodies like Niagara, but this is a whole different level. We know that. Not really impressed with what Izzo's got there at Michigan State. The question is, can they hang with Kansas? I mean, this is a 6.5 number. This is a big number, Merrill. What are you thinking we're going to get here in this one?
So I was talking to somebody last week that knows the Howard program well, and Howard opened up, of course, against Kansas last Monday as a 27.5-point dog, lost by 30. And I believe they stayed out there to play Missouri recently as well. They made over $1 million on that 1-week trip to play Kansas and Missouri. So my first question is, how do I get that gig? I will gladly take one of my teams out there. I'll do it for $10,000 and let them beat us by 30 or 50. But Howard actually, if you recall, won the MEAC last year. I think they were like the 4th seed. They went down to Norfolk State and won that tournament. So that was a good win by Kansas, winning by 30. And, of course, they had a huge test against North Carolina right after that last Friday, and they showed well there, winning by 3. But they were an 8-point favorite, so they didn't cover a very high-scoring game there. What's really impressive, for a game to have 181 total points and for Kansas to have only 4 turnovers in the game after having 14 against Howard. Kind of strange there. Michigan State has forced 31 turnovers so far, and I'm right. I like we said, Joe, I think you're right. They're going to be down a little bit this year, which makes me think they're going to have to rely on that Izzo half-court defense more. With that said, they did put up 81 and 96 in their first 2 games, but they were 20 and 30-point favorites. But what jumps out to me is they held Monmouth and Niagara to 57 and 60 points. So I really do think Michigan State wants to slow this game down, make it ugly, whereas Kansas wants to run and gun and push the tempo like they were able to do against North Carolina. So although I don't normally recommend parlays, I've always said the only time you should ever do a 2-team parlay is when the side and total are somewhat correlated. I think you can make a case for Michigan State under or Kansas over in this one. And we have seen the line drop a little bit from 6.5 down to 5.5, yet the total has held steady at 151. So I would lean Michigan State under or Kansas over, depending on which preference you like.
Yeah, I think there is absolutely is Merrill. Hold on one second there as we get something fixed here quick with the screen
Brian's
there.
Cat
We'll get that
something?
up in a second.
Did his cat do something?
No, he didn't do it.
Did it step on a cord?
I think, Brian, listen, that cat has been around as long as Hunter Dickinson has been around, because apparently he is actually still playing college basketball. God damn it, that cat's been around forever. But listen, Hunter Dickinson knows Kansas well, or knows Michigan State rather well. Izzo knows him pretty well. He's kind of owned him over the years with his days over at Michigan, but it just feels like this may not be the Izzo kind of Spartans team we're used to seeing here. Feels like Kansas is the right side, but are we willing to lay this kind of number this early on?
Yeah, you mentioned the 6.5. I think that was the opener. I think it's down to 5.5, just about everywhere now. My line on this game, and I'll try to give you my line on every game because everything I do is based on my power ratings. In college basketball, I am more of a guy who will play a lot of games as opposed to the other sports, just because there's so many games out there. I would rather have an 8-game card where I can go 5-3 than try to nitpick one or two in college basketball. But my line on this game is 4.5, so a little edge, I guess, on Michigan State. But Steve mentioned the tempo rank between these two teams. The Jayhawks, the true tempo rank of 106. Michigan State 240. Michigan State prefers the half-court games. They've done that for a while. Kansas usually recruits better athletes, so they're comfortable in the open court. But 106 means that they're able to play both ways and have success. The Spartans' average opponent rank right now is 310. As Steve mentioned, they haven't played anybody yet. Kansas has played one nobody, and then they played North Carolina in a game the other day where they had a big lead and then had to fight their way back to get that victory. A little bit of a scare for Kansas. They've played a good opponent so far. Michigan State, we'll have to see what happens. Michigan State traditionally has been much better at the end of the season than they are at the beginning. Both Fierce and Holloman run this offense very well, but we do have concerns with rebounding for Michigan State. Hunter Dickinson, you mentioned him coming in, terrific player for Kansas, one of the best all-around players in college basketball, but he does have a weakness defensively. So if you can get him in foul trouble, that is your chance to take advantage. Problem is, I like the Michigan State guard play better than I like the forward and center play, so I don't know if that's going to become a factor here. This team in Kansas is a deep and loaded with playmakers, although they do have like 5 guys out, a couple out for the season, and a few more that are questionable for tonight. But my number gives a slight edge to the underdog, but I don't want to stand in front of this Kansas team. They've already proven that they can beat a quality opponent, and I'll be passing on this one, even though my number shows a 1-point advantage. Normally, I look for at least 1.5-point advantage along with the handicapping of the game. I don't see it here, so I'll be passing on this one.
Passing on this one here. It wouldn't shock me at all, though, if we get a big defensive effort from Michigan State and the under goes to the, well, we're looking at an under in that game for sure. I don't know that an under is ever going to come into play in the late game there with the Champions Classic when we're dealing with Kentucky and Duke here. Also 5.5, 160.5 is what we're looking at this one. And let's face it, Duke has just a plethora of shooters in this matchup, but so does Kentucky, the new look Kentucky, who has never met a three they don't like. Thanks to Coach Pope now, the new head of the Kentucky basketball program. There's just shooters everywhere. There's tempo everywhere here, Merrill. There is just guys that can fly up and down the court and drain threes from all over the place. You got one of the tallest backcourts in the country in Duke. I don't know how much Kentucky is going to be trying to post up and play any sort of half-court basketball here. So I don't know. It's still an interesting number here. Who do you give the edge to with Kentucky and Duke tonight?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the total, Joe, because as we speak, doing this show live here right around 2:30 Eastern on Tuesday afternoon, if you check the WagerTalk live odds screen, you'll see that the under just had a sharp money move here over the last 10 minutes or so. Dropped from 60.5 in a lot of spots down to 159.5. And I actually agree with that under move for a couple reasons. Now, look, if Kentucky goes out there, like you said, they shoot lights out from 3, I'm going to like them plus 5.5, and I'm going to like the over. But I think early in the season, neutral court, by the way, also does not help the three-point shooting, in my opinion. I think the more polished veteran team, Duke, is probably going to control the tempo more. And if you look at Duke last year, they were a below-average tempo team. In fact, the final rankings, they were 253 out of about 360 teams in tempo. We do have a new system and staff with Kentucky, but they played extremely fast last year, so I don't think they'll play any faster. So just looking at the tempo ratings, I think if Duke could dictate things as they should as a 5.5-point favorite on a neutral court, it could slow the game down a little bit. And while both teams have put up a lot of points so far, their defenses have actually looked pretty good. I know they haven't played anybody. Duke held Maine and West Point to 62 and 58 points, 32% shooting. Kentucky held Wright State and Bucknell. They were over 21-point favorites in both of those games, by the way, held them to 35 and 39.5% shooting. But still, the defenses look strong. Both three-point defenses have been excellent so far. And when you have athletes, you can cover the perimeter a little bit better than the average college basketball team. So this is a big total. And while I normally look to play big totals over, I think there actually might be some under here, and the sharp money seems to agree as this line just dropped a few minutes ago down to 159.5.
Yeah, it's interesting because Duke, Maine and Army, two of the slower paced teams in the country here. They're not going to look to get out and run. So, Brian, I don't know how you mimic how fast Kentucky's going to try to get out there and run up and down the court. Again, having the size that Duke has, it doesn't make any sense, I think, for Kentucky to try and play any sort of half-court game against those guys there because they are one of the more athletic teams in the country. So if we get a whole lot of possessions here, it could be fireworks. But to Merrill's point, it's a neutral site game here, and if the threes aren't falling, it might not make a difference how many possessions if you can't make any buckets. So what do you think we're going to get in this one?
Yeah, living in Vegas, I have the opportunity to see other college teams out here in tournaments all season long. And I've been able to take advantage of that in the past. I don't play a lot of totals. Steve does much more totals than what I do. But I have noticed when the teams have not played on that court before that the shooting is a little bit worse. The shooting percentages, which would tend to play an under. But as you mentioned here, this is a team here where both teams probably want to run. I know Kentucky does. Kentucky comes in with a tempo rank of 26, while Duke comes in at 139. Now, granted, they've only played 2 games so far, but it's something to take a look at. My line on this game is Duke 5.5, exactly what the line is right now, so I'm not seeing much of an edge there. Kentucky needs a big game from Amari Williams down low. He's been dominant on the glass. He's a very good defensive player. So my concern, if you're playing Kentucky, is to make sure he doesn't get into foul trouble. Once he gets into foul trouble, then Duke can run wild on him and probably get the over. So if you're looking for a total and you see him getting into foul trouble, maybe play the in-game total over in that case because he is such a key defensive player and good rebounder for this Kentucky team. He doesn't add much scoring volume, but he's the best defender for both teams in this game. Cooper Flagg's the big name for the Duke lineup, but Tyrese Proctor is the guy who runs this offense. Those two are two valuable players. Not much can be taken from the two opponents they played so far this year. They were prohibitive favorites in those games. My power rating says no play on here, but if I was looking to play in-game, I would take a look at Amari Williams. If he gets into foul trouble, I would be looking to play Duke in this contest.
Looking to play Duke, and I don't know, Merrill, if you see anything on there or what the team totals are in here, but I don't know how the hell Duke's going to stop the scoring and ridiculous firepower of Duke in this game. I really don't. So I wouldn't imagine if the totals going down, the team totals would be, maybe 75, 76 and a half? I don't think they'd be up to 80, would they?
It's 82.5 and 77.5 right now. That gets you about 160 with a 5-point line. So, so, the line right now is 5.5, 59.5. So 82.5, 77.5 with some juice or a half-point variance is what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's you like Duke to win and cover this game. They're getting 80-some-odd points in it. They're not going to win a 60-55 game. That is for sure here. You're also starting to get guys in some spots here tonight. Teams like North Florida, for instance, who have won all their games, but they're stepping up in class against a team like Georgia. You've got Sam Houston State on the road, also has looked pretty decent, taking on Baylor. So, Merrill, how do you look at this early in the season when you've got some of these, these smaller conferences, smaller schools taking on some of the big boys here? Maybe more experience on the mid-majors, a lot of guys trying to get together on the Baylors of the world, for instance, here. Is there any value in looking at some of these lesser teams here against the big boys?
Yeah, I mean, the one edge I've said you always have as a sports bettor is that they have to put a number up on every game on the board. And college basketball is the ultimate example of that. They have to put numbers up on several hundred Division I teams whenever they're playing on any given day.
Yep.
And as sports bettors and handicappers, we can sit back and we can play one game, no games, 3 games, whatever we want. So what I look for is play on and play against teams. And what kind of makes my short list in November, and you reference, it's tough when you're not comparing apples to apples with, bigger conferences against lesser, is I look for misleading results. And I do the same thing in football. Maybe a team has 3 or 4 fumbles in a game. Interceptions aren't random, but fumbles are. Same thing with basketball. The great equalizer in football is turnovers. In basketball nowadays, it's 3-point variance. And yes, some teams shoot the 3 better than others. The best will be in the 40% range. The worst will be in the low 30s. Nobody's going to finish the season after 30-some games shooting in the 20% range. Maybe 1 or 2 teams out of 360. There's some really bad teams. But keep an eye on that. Another thing you want to look at early in the season are teams that are veteran teams, because they could go out and win 5-6 games in a row, whereas a team that has a new coaching staff, new system, they're not going to just flip a switch and fix their problems after 1 or 2 games. So talk about turnovers in football. Look at turnovers also in basketball. Teams that aren't taking care of the ball have a poor point guard situation. If they're facing a pressure team, especially on the road, I'd be very careful with them. And that's sometimes when the floodgates can open. So a lot of variables you can look at. But once again, you could pick and choose your spots, play on or play against teams, and just wait until the matchup is right. Whereas the odds makers have to put lines up on every single game every day. And it really kind of leaves them naked at times.
So, Brian, before I pepper Merrill about his new coach and their game tonight for William and Mary at Norfolk State, of course you knew that was coming, Merrill. I don't want to hear it.
I don't know if I can comment on this stuff anymore, man. I'm coaching his son, so I got to be careful with this. But I will give you some general.
Saying.
On the NFL shows, like they don't pick the game they're broadcasting. I've been thinking about this, folks. I might have to be very cautious with the William and Mary. I will give it to you as an analyst.
Yes. Wait, what? What's Dan Earl, line 2? No, okay, we'll get to that in a minute there, Merrill. He's going to want to talk to you. But Brian Leonard, same question to you when it comes to some of these early season matchups here. What are some of the games that you do look at? To Merrill's point, they got to put numbers on all of them. And, I've already seen in the first couple of games, the numbers are way off in some of these games. I mean, like not even remotely close. Villanova the other night was laying 17 and couldn't win. So do you have an advantage early on in college basketball with some of these numbers, you think, with the books?
Yeah, I think you do. One of the things I look at is the depth of the teams. And we just talked about the Michigan State. Michigan State in the first half of the season, he's always throwing in different combinations as it goes on. He wants to win. Obviously, he's not going to lose his job if he loses early games. If they make it to the tournament and do well in the tournament, that's the goal. So if you could find teams like that early on, you can make some good money on. There's other teams that, especially if you get a new coach, he wants to come in, he wants to win every game, and he wants to win big. Living here in Las Vegas, used to have season tickets for UNLV Rebels, and you knew when they played a lesser team that they could manhandle, they were going to play deep and they were going to manhandle that team, and they were going to win by a margin. But then again, when they stepped up in class, they were totally lost at that point. So it makes a lot of sense to play teams right now who have played a better schedule thus far, because you know what they're going to get in those games. I also like to play teams that maybe have been bad in the past, made a coaching change, and you could see them making some adjustments. You mentioned returning starters. Obviously, that's a big deal. The unfortunate thing is a lot of teams, and we see this in college football all the time, they'll have a lot of returning starters coming back, but they're not very good. So that is a concern when you see that, when you do look at a team and they've got 4 of the 5 starters back, well, are they guys that are going to win for that team, or are they the guys that they recruited even better? So you've got to be able to take advantage of that. But yeah, early on, there's a few times where so far a team that I think is very good came out and did not play well the first game. And it's a 1-game sample. People say, hey, what's going on with this? And you could take advantage of that. We see it in college football, your Division II schools beating the Division I schools. Well, Duke, they stink. They lost to this team. Well, all of a sudden Duke comes out and plays the FBS schools, and they win 6 or 7 straight. So you've got to really take a look at what the matchups are, who they played coming into this game, and also what they have on deck. I believe this Duke game that we just spoke about, Duke has the next week off, where Kentucky's got another game in between. So at the end of the game, Duke can play their starters longer in that game, whereas Kentucky might say, you know what, we got another game coming up. Let me pull some of these guys. So a lot of these teams want to play their starters as long as possible. Others want to play their bench as long as they possibly can and still get the victory. You just need to know a little bit about these teams going in.
Yeah, and understanding that the books too certainly at a bit of a disadvantage with the amount of schools, and if you think it's hard to figure out where the NIL money is going now, it's only going to get crazier, Maryland. It's only going to take guys a little bit longer to figure it out. You got guys like at Baylor right now and Coach Drew there it's an entire new set of guys this year, and it's going to be like that for a while for some of the blue blood programs, but some of the lesser schools are going to have a little bit more continuity, and that's going to matter early on in the season for sure, except for maybe St. Mary's, who has a new coach, from what I understand. And we'll be taking on Norfolk here. I will just say this. The word on the street is don't expect a lot of up-tempo games with William and Mary. Expect maybe a lot of unders. Are you of that same mindset with your alma mater here tonight?
Well, you had a Freudian slip there. I hope William & Mary turns into St. Mary's of California. There's a lot of St. Mary's out there, but the one I'd like to
I was talking the high school. I was talking the high school. All right, you got it.
Yeah, I mean, even Mount St. Mary's has made the NCAA tournament before up in Maryland. Yes. So I do think Brian Earl's going to turn things around here. Adam Trigger is a big fan. He's talked to me on and off the air about what a great job Coach Earl did at Cornell, and that's where he came from. He took them to the NIT last year, and they lost by just a basket or so to Ohio State, almost pulled that upset. Problem is he doesn't have the horses here yet, I think, to run his system. He likes to play fast. Ivy League Player of the Year from Cornell apparently went to Vanderbilt, got $200,000 to go to Vanderbilt. So he did not come down here, unfortunately. I'll tell you what, I hope the Sharps are right. I love sharp money. I respect sharp money. And they're on William & Mary here for the second game in a row. They were a road favorite at Radford on Friday night. I was shocked to see that line because it's a new system, and the cupboard is kind of thin right now. They were up 5 in the second half in that game. Then they got outscored by 17, lost by 12. Just went ice cold from the field. This line opened around like 1.5. And when I last checked, I think I'll pull it up right now. The William Mary's a 2.5, even a 3-point favorite of one of the sharpest books around the world. So sharp money is on the Tribe tonight. I'm actually shocked to see him as a favorite in this game. Norfolk State's 3-0. Played absolutely nobody in the first 2 games. PSU Wilkes-Barre and Virginia Lynchburg. But they just beat James Madison on Saturday outright as a 4.5-point home dog by 14 points. That line, by the way, went from 2.5 to 4.5. The Sharps are fading Norfolk State, so maybe this is just a fade of Norfolk State again. But Norfolk has shot 55% or better in all 3 games. And William & Mary is going to play fast. Coach Earl loves to run and gun. He wants them shooting in 10 seconds or less, and they're going to press. I love the full-court press. This is something I've never seen in 20-plus years here at William & Mary. I've never understood why teams don't press more when you're kind of a below-average team talent-wise. Option in football, military academies play the triple option, right, because they can't outman the other team, the big SEC schools and whatnot. So I'd like the pressure style. I just don't know if they have the offense to finish. The over would seem like an obvious move here at 156 with a fast tempo, but it concerns me that William Mary shot just 34.5% against Radford, and against Division III Dickinson, a bad Division III team, by the way. They only shot 45% last week, the first home game, which I went to. By the way, if you recognize Dickinson, it's Carlisle, Pennsylvania, home of the Redskins training camp back in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, fun team to watch. They're going to play fast. Maybe the over is the buy once their offense starts clicking a little bit better.
Well, St. Mary's is interesting that you bring it up because I see there's somebody in the chat room here, Brian. You'll like this. Brian, a Ohio guy. He loves Akron on the money line tonight, and they happen to be playing St. Mary's. So he must have been very impressed with the win over Ohio Wesleyan. I'm not that as impressed, however, to think that they're going to just outgun St. Mary's here. But stranger things have happened, I guess. Are you going to get those big upsets early in the season as opposed to, I don't know, midway in the season, right? Why not? Look at that. Akron money line, plus 825. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't know if I want to go that deep and take the money line, but I do think Akron's an underrated team here. I made the line about closer to 12 here, so Akron would be my preferred side in this one. When I take a look at the two teams combined, the St. Mary's offensively is so much better. They have 50 offensive rank right now. Akron 175. I'm quoting these numbers, but like I said, they've only played 1 or 2 games, so we don't know what's going to happen. But I spent a lot of time at the Jar back when I was in college at Akron, going to these games, and they've always been a very good team. Nice underdog. I always prefer them when they don't get to the big dance very often, but they go to the smaller conference or smaller tournaments at the end of the season, and they're always a dangerous underdog. The St. Mary's team is obviously very good. They've got a team right now in playmaking. They've got one guy who's excellent, Marcelonis. I don't know if that's how you spell his name or pronounce his name, but he's a great playmaker, and he's getting close to the entire game. He's going 37.8 minutes a game. In fact, they got 3 guys in the lineup that are averaging over 35 minutes. So they're not a very deep team. That is the concern right now when you got for St. Mary's. But when you take a look at Akron, they go a little bit deeper. They've got 6 guys going 20 minutes a game. So the depth part goes to them. In fact, I prefer that in that regard. But Akron's a good team. I think Akron's going to do well overall, but they're not at the level of St. Mary's as of yet. But it's early in the season. And like I said, these coaches like to do a little bit of different things early. It's big for this Akron team to go on the road and compete with the St. Mary's, who's gone to the tournament how many years. So I expect Akron to go out there and really try to win this game. St. Mary's may try to rest some of these guys for getting those big minutes because the game's not nearly as important to them. I made this line less. I like Akron in this game, but I don't think they'll win straight up.
It's bold if they do. I'll tell you that. It'd be a hell of a call. Make sure you come back here tomorrow and tell us I told you so. Absolutely. In that game, Merrill, a lot of folks looking. I think it's going to be extremely interesting. Is this Georgia game here tonight with North Florida, who has, it's been pretty impressive. They kicked off the season on the road with a win at South Carolina. They smoked Charleston Southern, and now they just won on the road at Georgia Tech, and they scored 105 points on Georgia Tech. So now they're getting, 14 and a half in this one here. I still think Georgia may be a little step up here from what they got, but there's no denying is 14 too many points here for an Ospreys team that apparently can shoot you out of the gym and has no problem doing it.
Yeah, first of all, I was confused. When did the Akron Zip logo become a kangaroo? I thought we were talking about, what was it, Kansas City, Missouri, the Roos there? I thought we had the wrong logo up for a second. I didn't know the Zips was a kangaroo.
Yes.
So
yeah, Zippy. He was voted maybe a decade ago or so. He was voted mascot of the year. Came in second place
year, wasn't he?
Yeah,
a decade ago. That kangaroo's been around for 10 years. I never knew that.
He's been around when I was in school. There, they had Zippy, but the reason why they have him is zips are basically the zippers on the rubbers you use from Akron. Back when you grew up where I did in Cleveland, you put on these rubbers over your shoes, and they got a little zipper on them, and that's how they got Zippy. That's how they call them the Zips.
Wow. So yeah, I guess the kangaroo is better than a galosh for the logo, which is that's actually very interesting. I love it. Yeah, this North Florida game, though, Osprey's also another great nickname. I would have completely forgot that was their nickname, Joe. I'm pretty good with my nicknames. That one would not have come to me. Heavy, sharp money on Georgia, though, and the Bulldogs. I know that nickname.
Yep.
This line opened 10. It's up to 14 and a half. So, yes, maybe 14 and a half is too much right now, but you're getting in front of one of the heavier sharp moves. And, we talk a lot about sharp money. I don't always agree with it, but I do pay attention to it early in the season in college basketball because there's a lot of guys out there. Like I said, the odds makers have these limits at like 1,000 to maybe 5,000 at most, where an NFL game's 50,000. These lines are soft. So the fact that this line has gone from 10 to 14 and a half tells me that the sharps definitely like Georgia here. And it is a huge step up in class for North Florida. And I talked about turnovers, 3-point variance. Another kind of hidden little stat I like to look at in college basketball is opponents' free throw percentage. And the reason I bring that up is because that is 100% random, in my opinion. And so far this season, North Florida's opponents have gone just 9 for 19 from the line on average, 49%. Now, maybe they're doing some weird voodoo as they're standing in the blocks there, but I think that's also another sign that maybe they're not quite as good as the overall math and numbers show. And we have seen some heavy money on Georgia in this game.
Yep. Ton of money on Georgia, in fact, coming in here as maybe it's back down to reality here for the Ospreys tonight. Guys, don't forget, of course, if you have a question or a game you want some answers on, or a team, and I know we had a question about Alabama coming in about whether or not they are a Final Four, another Final Four team that we should be looking at. Todd came in with that one, if we think they'll make another run here, and all indications are that Alabama and Nate Oates will once again have a team that will drop 100 points on you and no problem, and do it with a smile on their face. But drop them in the chat room. Of course, drop them in the comments section if you're watching this on the replay. Don't forget, thumbs up and a subscribe would be fantastic. Those of you joining us on YouTube, if you're on IG or TikTok, follow us if you haven't done so already here on WagerTalk TV. Big picture, though, Merrill, teams like Alabama, teams like the Blue Bloods, it's a long season. Anything can happen here. But I guess everyone's question will also be, is UConn going to make a run for a third time, which I don't believe has happened since what? William and Mary did it back in 1836. When was the last time we had a three-peat champion? I think it's been.
Brian, my guess would be UCLA probably with Wooden, wouldn't it? I don't know the answer. I know Florida.
Be Wooden, that's it.
Florida did it with Donovan, of course, in 06, 07. We always heard about that last year. But yeah, it'd have to be UCLA, I would think, like back in the early 70s.
The only ones I know of.
Yeah, that's all I can think of. Joe, I want to point out real quick, you talk about Alabama.
Sure.
The reason I'll take the no on the Final Four is because, yes, they've got talent again, and I think Oates is a great coach, but the defense is what I got to see improve. I'm looking at last year's KenPom, the final rankings here. Connecticut finished number 1 overall, obviously. They were a dominant team. They played at the 330th slowest tempo in the nation. Alabama played at the 14th fastest. You look at all of the teams ahead of Alabama, they were basically all top 10, except for a couple of them in defensive efficiency. Bama was 111th. I mean, they were the huge outliers. So I really believe, although defense wins championships, I think is a bit overrated this year. Nowadays, I think offense wins a lot more games. I do think you got to have a better than a top 111 defense come crunch time. And until I see that they get a better defensive mindset in Alabama, I don't see that as a Final Four program.
Yeah, Brian, you agree here? Defense wins championships still in your mind?
Well, for the most part, but I do like Alabama. In fact, I like Alabama at the current numbers. I think Alabama's a nice bet to win it all. Anytime you can get a team that has the better players in a game and they're playing at a faster pace, that's smart. Anytime you've got the better players, that's why the Golden State Warriors have had such a dynasty over the last decade. They've got the best players, and they play fast. If you watch the Cleveland Cavaliers now, they're a deep team that plays fast. And Cleveland's gotten off to, a 12-0 start? If you've got the better talent in a game and you're slowing it down like a Michigan State does, that is not good for your players. You've got to let those thoroughbreds go out there and run. And so if you've got a team that can run the court, and other teams don't play many like that, they get worn out really fast, especially early on in the season when you find teams that don't have very much depth, or they don't know what kind of depth they've got. You've got a veteran team that wants to get out and run, and they got the better players. That's the teams I want to play early on in the year.
Yep, looking for that. Roderick Green in the house. Mac in the house likes Loyola Maryland -2. Here tonight. Brian, by the way, is saying at least an Akron win, if not a cover in there. So he's agreeing with you also. Drexel getting some love, Towson getting some love. And unfortunately, Merrill, there are some people think that Norfolk State is going to run away with the game here tonight. But to your credit, you had said you didn't necessarily agree with what you're seeing so far in the marketplace there. But it is early on in the season. Plenty more college basketball coming your way. In the meantime, Brian Lerner, let me ask you. I know you're locked loaded here tonight on this slate. How many games do you have at your page of Wager Talk right now?
Yeah, right now it's Customer Appreciation Day, so I've got a $5 play up in hockey. Swept the board last night in hockey, 3-0 overall. Had a nice college basketball winner on DePaul, which was never in doubt. 3 plays in college basketball today. I may add more later. I've got certain numbers that I'm looking for. If I can get that number and it's not due to an injury, I'll add that. But right now we've got 3 plays up, $19 for our package. I know you've thrown Steve some games on the extra board. I am not spending as much time on the extra board this year. So if we're doing these shows and you see those games, Steve will give you a better breakdown than I would on that. I'm going to try to stick to the regular board. There's so many games out there right now. And I've gotten some feedback in the past from some clients that didn't like playing the Norfolk State games. They want to play the Duke games, things like that. So I'm going to try to stick to the regular board for my clients this year.
All right, sticking to the regular board. And Merrill, I know Customer Appreciation, $5 Tuesday here. Is it the NBA you concentrated on?
Yeah, strong NBA best bet tonight, and it is just $5 because it is $5 Tuesday. That's an instant 80% discount off the normal price. And I'm number 1 all time in the history of WagerTalk.com in profit one in the NBA. In fact, the last 3 years alone, up over 200 units in the NBA, and you can get tonight's top play for just $5. So I know we're talking college hoops, but the strongest basketball play on the board tonight is just $5, and it comes in the NBA. Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com. And if you'd like some previews for the Tuesday and Wednesday night MAC games, I did some solo videos here. Also going to have your Thursday night NFL game, not my Washington Commanders against the Eagles. I've been doing every NFL Thursday night game since week 3, and I've gone 7-1 on those free play videos. So check that out as well. Click subscribe, click the bell for instant alerts, comment below. We read the comments and reply back. And thumbs up, like is greatly appreciated.
Oh, I like that. All right, Brian, if you're concentrating on some of the big boys here, I know Villanova's got a game here tonight against St. Joe's. There are not a lot of people very happy with Kyle Neptune or the way the direction Villanova is headed. Now, Jay Wright is not walking in to the damn building anytime soon. In fact, Jay Wright has said it on air that he's enjoying himself, actually, for the first time in a long time. He got the hell out of college basketball the minute the NIL money became a reality here. But these are 2 teams that a lot of people thought would be better. Dixon is another guy that's got to be 30 years old. It feels like he's been at Villanova forever. But I don't know. Outside of him, I don't know that they have enough scoring, and I don't think Neptune's a great coach. So it's kind of hard to back Nova, especially since they just lost to Columbia.
Yeah, Nova's not the same team as they had been in the past. I made a lot of money over the years on Villanova, but the last couple seasons they have not been as good, and I don't think as highly of them this year. In fact, I made this a pick'em game, and the line is currently 3. So if I'm looking to play anything in this game, it's St. Joseph's. You mentioned Dixon, excellent guy. He's going to take all the shots. Plays 31 minutes a game. He's their big shooter on this team, but it drops off right after that. Perkins is pretty good. Tyler Perkins, good rebounder, good scorer, but overall, this team drops off pretty much after that. And if you take a look at the depth on this team, I just don't think they just don't have it. St. Joseph's, I like their team here. They've got some guys on this team, very good rebounder. Rasheer Fleming, excellent rebounder. They're going to need the best out of him, but Xavier Brown is a very good playmaker. And those 2 play over 30 minutes a game. In fact, they've got 4 guys right now playing over 30. That is a concern when you get into the depth of these teams. So I prefer the St. Joseph side here. It didn't quite make it from a number standpoint. It fits into what I look for, but it's early, and I want to see a little bit more of Villanova before I go out and back St. Joseph.
It just drives me crazy. And that's another thing, Merrill. A lot of folks, and I don't know a ton of books, maybe you guys do, the props in college hoops. Have you seen anything, Merrill, as far as books-wise that carry them there? It's so hard to find them. Some guys are screaming about how, Dixon's a guy that they always want to bet the over on a point prop, but you can't find them. I would imagine, Brian, you have more options in Vegas than most, no?
No, that's the problem. In
Wow.
Vegas, we might have three or four casinos that put up some props in football and all, but it's not worth me handicapping it if I can't get enough money down on it. So I
Right.
don't play props. I'd like to play them, but if you're going to pay $25 for a play on a prop and you can only bet $50 on it, what's the use of it? So
What's the point?
I just stick with sides for the most part.
Merrill, you find anything where you're at as far as college basketball player props?
Well, first of all, where I'm at, you definitely won't, because Virginia, they're not even allowed to
They
put
won't.
college props up on any sport, and that's how it is with a lot of
Gotcha.
these new states, that have FanDuel and DraftKings. So I would say of the 30 legal states out there, the majority of them probably aren't even allowed to do player props if they want it. But then bigger picture, the reason Vegas, who could do it, doesn't do it is because, first of all, on a college basketball total, the limit's like 500 to 1,000. Can you imagine how low it would be on a player prop? Because they'd get nothing but some sharp action. I would think it would make sense on like the Duke, Kentucky and Kansas, Michigan State type games to maybe put up one or two big names like a Dickinson or something. But yeah, you're not going to see him otherwise. And I don't even really think you see him in college football. It's pretty much a pro thing only. Come tournament time, I guess we'll find out. Because if you could do it, you'd think they would do it in the Final Four and whatnot. But even then, it's going to be pretty thin, slim pickings.
You're gonna, I would imagine the two guys that Duke has right now with Knipple there and Flagg. A lot of people would be looking to jump in on their props because they are going to score a few points here this season for sure. All right, so we got Duke, we got Kentucky, we got Kansas, we got Michigan State headlining a pretty decent card. We got a better card tomorrow. In fact, a lot more of the top 25 teams in action. We'll be back with another edition of the College Basketball Tip-Off Show tomorrow, 2:15 Eastern Time. If you hit that bell and the subscribe button, of course, you'll get notified when we go live. Don't forget, thumbs up on the way out of here and get ready. We got plenty of NBA action tonight. The NBA tip-off show coming up in about 30 minutes here, so don't go too far. Hang in there. We'll be back in about 30. Appreciate Steve Merrill and Brian Leonard. We'll see them throughout the season here on the College Basketball Tip-Off Show, and we'll see you guys here shortly for another edition of the NBA Tip-Off Show on WagerTalk TV. Good luck, guys. We'll see you shortly.